joining us on Get the Tea with Buta. I'm your host, Buta Biberaj. What we've decided to do is, in light of the fact that we have some huge elections that are taking place in Virginia, that we're going to go ahead and have some conversations with those candidates who are brave enough and are willing to go ahead and put themselves in the forefront of the community. We want to give them each an opportunity to be able to share what their vision is with you, our community members. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and have a conversation with Sean Perryman. I have the luxury and the pleasure of being joined with my co-host and co-panelist today, Rizwan Jaka. Hi, Rizwan, how are you?
Good, Buta. Thank you very much for hosting and organizing this session and all the other sessions as well.
Well, thank you. If you would not mind, Rizwan, can you do me a favor and introduce yourself a little bit? Because I know you're very huge in our community, but there may be one person who does not know you.
Thank you again. Peace, salam, shalom, namaste, sat sri akal, Allahu haba. Again, Rizwan Jaka. I am the chair of the board of the All Dulles Area Muslim Society, the Adams Center, the second largest mosque in the USA, with 11 branches and satellites in Northern Virginia. We are a nonprofit, obviously nonpartisan organization. I'm involved with multiple interfaith organizations, as well as scouting, and 16-year life member of the NAACP Loudoun. And got 6 kids, they're all scouts. So.
Not only are they all scouts, but they're also all awesome, as is your wife. So you've done a great job of surrounding yourself with very cool people. So thank you, Rizwan. Thank you very much for being part of this. Sean, what we're going to do is, as we discussed a little bit earlier, is we're going to give you an opportunity to go ahead and introduce yourself and try to do them in blocks of 2 minutes so that we could ask some questions that we've prepared, as well as have been asked by our community members to ask of you. So if you would like to do an introduction, we would appreciate it.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Perryman. I'm a candidate for Lieutenant Governor here in Virginia. I used to lead the Fairfax County NAACP. I was a president, youngest president in its 102-year history. Also grew it to be the largest chapter in the Commonwealth. Really happy to be with you this evening. My background and experience, I guess I'm still an attorney. I used to practice corporate litigation for a number of years, and then went on to work for Congressman Elijah Cummings on the Hill as a counsel for the House Oversight Committee. And now I work in tech policy, dealing with emerging technologies and broadband issues. Really happy to be here and bring those issues to the forefront in my bid for statewide office.
Excellent. So I'm going to start off with the first question, if I may, and this did come from a community member of ours here in Loudoun County. And the question is, what is your position on both finance reform as well as voting reforms?
Sorry, financial, I didn't hear the first part.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Finance reform as it relates to elections.
Campaign. Yeah, here in Virginia, it's literally the Wild West of campaign finance. You can give someone $1 million if you wanted to, and they could use that money however they see fit to use their campaign money. What we desperately need is contribution limits, and I've been out speaking about that, how we need to put limits on our contributions, whether it's from a corporation or for a person. You should not be able to give unlimited money. We also should put restrictions on how people can use their campaign finance account so that they can't use it for any and everything under the sun. I think these are just common sense reforms that we see across the country. And of course, I always support voting rights. I'm actually a little bit further out than many of the other candidates. I've come out and said we need to have a amendment, or rather change the Virginia Constitution so that we never take away a person's right to vote just because they were incarcerated. This is a huge racial justice issue, it's a huge voting rights issue, and it's one where I've been taking the lead as it concerns this race.
Okay, Rizwan?
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Buta. So Sean, again, appreciate you being here, and thanks to you and all the candidates for your courage to run for office and to serve in the public arena. The question I have is on public safety. Hate crimes continue to increase. We've seen a rise in hate crimes, especially these days against Asian Americans, African Americans, Latinx, Jewish, Muslim, Sikh, LGBTQI, and many other communities. And, I'm a part of the National and Regional Muslim Jewish Advisory Council of Virginia, Maryland, and DC. And we are working with the bipartisan lawmakers nationally on the No Hate Act that's being reintroduced now. And it's about having better reporting from local law enforcement to national law enforcement. Many jurisdictions around the country do not report hate crimes. So with better reporting can then come more resources from a national perspective. What would you do as Lieutenant Governor to encourage better reporting from local to national, as well as additional resources to counter hate crimes at state and local levels?
That's right. No, that's a great question. And, you know, as the former president of NAACP, I've dealt with this firsthand. You know, obviously, our community is impacted by hate crimes. I've seen in the past few years as the former president's rhetoric has changed, we see the different communities that are targeted. Our Jewish community was targeted here in Northern Virginia quite a bit during that term. And now we're seeing, of course, a rise in crime against the AAPI community. As Lieutenant Governor, I would definitely encourage just what you said, an improved hate crime reporting database so that we can get that to the federal level. We also have now in Virginia an Office of Civil Rights. They should be prosecuting these hate crimes. We need to make sure that we're taking this seriously. And I put out a series of policies related specifically to the increase that we've seen in the AAPI community. Because as Democrats, we shouldn't be the party of thoughts and prayers. We should be the party of policy. And I'm obviously seeking the Democratic nomination here. So I think that's some of the things we can do, but we also have to talk about disarming people that we know to be dangerous, whether that's domestic violence or people associated with hate groups. So these are some of the things that we need to address here in Virginia. And one of the things I would be encouraging working with folks, whoever the Attorney General may be when I take office.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. The next question that we had is, and we've all been dealing with the pandemic, the loss of life, the loss of resources that people have had, both from a personal as well as from a business perspective. We see a lot of times on the news right now that we might not be over that hurdle, even though the vaccination process is moving forward, and it's been a blessing to see. In the event that Virginia is to get another strong, heavy wave, and you are in office in that time, what do you think is the proper plan for Virginia to take to make sure that we're ensuring for the safety of all Virginians?
And we were to get another heavy wave. Yeah, you know, and this kind of, in a strange way, relates back to the hate crime question, right? When we talk about having better data, what I've seen during this pandemic, whether it was getting unemployment insurance to people, trying to figure out the vaccination rollout, we really have a lack of digital infrastructure in Virginia. And the agencies are really siloed off in terms of how they deal with data. So I think as it relates to hate crimes, we obviously want to have a better database in place. As it relates to the virus, what we've seen is that we need better data, because then we can take an equity approach where we're not just saying, I'm going to give vaccines to the areas with the biggest population. We should give vaccines to the places with the biggest risk. And so if we were to see another spike, and we've seen this already, certain counties are not having the same safety measures in place. And so we need to direct those resources properly, but that requires the good data and an easy way of accessing it. And then what I would do, I would not have another business shutdown like we did before. Our business community has figured out a way to operate safely in this, but we need to make sure that we are regulating it in a way that keeps businesses open, keep people at work, but getting vaccines and testing out to the communities that need it. One of the things I've been doing as part of my campaign is offering free testing in different parts of the state, because people think this virus is over, but it's still very real and we still have to remain vigilant.
Right. So Sean, got a question for you on environment. My wife Priscilla is very involved in Interfaith Power and Light and other environmental causes, and so I consulted her before I asked this question. But basically, you know, obviously we know, obviously with the horrific pandemic, you know, many people that were able to stay home or not drive as much. Obviously, we thank our essential workers and all the medical professionals and officials that had to be on the front lines. We truly appreciate them. But the environment did get better during the pandemic because more people were home and less driving. And so knowing that, you know, we can do better, you know, and we know electric vehicles are awesome, but even electric vehicles get their power from fossil fuels. So what can you do if you were Lieutenant Governor to encourage more solar and wind power in Virginia? And also, would you consider reinstating the solar, wind, electric tax incentives that have begun to sunset?
Yeah, I would definitely consider reinstating those. We have to do everything we can to push people towards clean environment. We've seen some of the things. Now, there's been issues with, in Fairfax County, for instance, we tried clean school buses, and that was, people had an issue because that was funded by Dominion. But Fairfax County actually has a larger bus fleet in its school system than Greyhound. So we can have profound impact if we attack the government resources, make sure those start to lead the way as far as solar and clean energy. So I think that's absolutely critical need that we need to do. We have to have a moratorium on fossil fuels. The way we go about having new infrastructure projects, they have to be clean energy focused. That's the best way I think we can attack this. And then the pandemic has exposed a lot of things that we can do things differently. One of the things I thought was interesting, as you mentioned, is that remote work is possible, and that we've seen the less congestion in traffic, and of course, less pollution as well. The tricky part of this is that our office spaces in the county give so much of revenue to our localities, but we have to start getting creative here, because I think we should be promoting and incentivizing people to do more remote work when possible, because our roadway is clear. It also keeps our environment clean. But that's something that we have to figure out with balancing the local budgets as well.
I'm going to segue a little bit as to, you just touched a little bit about offices and things of that nature. In Virginia, we see that there is a wide opportunity gap in many areas, and that also includes employment opportunities. What plan do you have for you to make sure that women, people of color, and veterans are in the front of the line for any sort of opportunities that are presented through the government programs?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, as we talk about employment, we have to talk about infrastructure. Too often we have jobs go to Northern Virginia and everything else, but they don't go to our rural areas because there's a lack of infrastructure, including broadband. So even if there is remote work, it's hard for folks in rural Virginia to get it. So we have to address that. But as it pertains to SWAM businesses, small women and minority-owned businesses, we actually have to make the process easier. It was actually absolutely shameful that we saw, CARES Act funding from the federal government going to folks like the LA Lakers, but not going to your mom and pop shops. You have to make it easier for them to get it. I think this goes back to digital infrastructure, making a very streamlined process to apply for these loans. And we're sitting on billions of dollars. We're actually sitting on $1 billion rainy day fund, hundreds of millions more in tax revenue that they didn't anticipate. We should start making that available to small and minority-owned businesses. We can't forget all the new markets. There's now a marijuana market, cannabis market coming to Virginia. They should absolutely set aside a certain amount of loans to minority-owned businesses, specifically communities that were hit by the war on drugs. So this is something that I've been talking about, but we have to make it's simple. We have to make the capital available, and we also have to make it easy to access. Those are the two things that are going to stimulate those particular businesses.
Okay, Vishwan, did you have another question?
Yes, I do, definitely. So another question that I have is on equity in education. I'm on the Loudoun County School Board Equity Committee for the past year and a half or so, and it's very important that we work on equity in education. And as a Muslim and an Asian American, that have and Muslim and Asian Americans and have benefited from the civil rights struggle of the African American community and the leadership of the African American community, and that has provided Asian and immigrants a step up when they arrived here in the US back in the 60s and 70s. And so as American Muslims, as Asians, we recognize the continued inequities that are suffered by the Black and Latino Virginians due to historic marginalization. And so there have been legislation that was proposed on finding equitable solutions in the governor's schools and in the educational system. And specifically, there was a House Bill 2305 and Senate Bill 04 on basically, countering the systemic racism and ensuring equity in the access in the governor's schools. If you can give your thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, and I got to work on this firsthand as part of a member of the NAACP, and my passion, the reason I joined the NAACP was as education chair, working on issues of education. We see not only in the governor's schools, but in our gifted programs, our AP programs, these huge disparities, and it starts early on. Teachers identifying students and failing to identify Black students being cut out of that program, but then if they had access to the appeals process, being able to get in. So these disparities persist throughout the whole education cycle. So we absolutely need to reform not only our governor schools, but our AP programs as well. Part of the problem is, and here's the thing, I'm one of the few lieutenant governor candidates that says there are people within the Democratic Party that are not aligned with our values, and we absolutely have to do something about it. We cannot pretend that the party line is the line of justice, because it's not. We have folks who stood up there when they talked about reforms to the governor's schools and said some of the most racist rhetoric that I've heard in the General Assembly. So we have to make sure that we are not having any tolerance for this, that they're not pitting the AAPI community against the Black community, because our interests are not that divergent. We have to come together and figure out how we can find diversity in our schools and make sure that same diversity lives in our governor's schools as well. So this is a reform that I absolutely support, and I think we need to take up again in the next session.
Okay, and thank you, Sean. Now we've also been joined by Philip Thompson. So Phil is going to go ahead and introduce himself, and then he also has a pair of questions for you. Thank you, Philip, for joining us.
Thank you. Sean knows me very well, and my question is, I want to keep this real. I've worked with the current lieutenant governor quite a bit on things, and I see how the lieutenant governor's position could be in a certain, if you look over what happened in Maryland, the Maryland lieutenant governor the governor gave the Maryland lieutenant governor a lot of different things to do during the pandemic, and Lloyd Rutherford was very, very much involved. In this situation, Governor Northam actually gave Lieutenant Governor Fairfax nothing to do, and he shut him out. And it was the same thing, from my understanding, with Terry McAuliffe and Ralph Northam. He gave Ralph Northam, nothing to do, no real role in the government. So as Lieutenant Governor, your really only job in the government is to oversee the state Senate, and your heartbeat away from, of course, the position is governor. So I hear all the candidates talking about all these different things they're proposing, all these things they're going to do, when reality it's purely a ceremonial position. So how do you, knowing that you're going into a purely ceremonial position that is all dependent on if the governor gives you any real job to do, how are you going to advocate for all these various things that you're talking about, knowing that the one or two opportunities, like recently with Lieutenant Governor Fairfax, was able to be the deciding vote on the marijuana passage and deciding vote on another bill for Medicaid, but in reality, there's really no fundamental job for the lieutenant governor in the state of Virginia. How are you going to use your position to try to advocate for all these things that you're talking about?
That's a great question. And, I think that's what separates me from a lot of these folks. They talk about all the things that they would like to do. I understand the lieutenant governor role isn't powerful. It doesn't have any power. The tie-breaking votes are going to be important. We saw that with marijuana. And as we keep going, especially going towards 2023, I think we're going to see a lot more ties to be broken, just because we have such a closely held Senate. That said, I'm talking about, when I talk about the role, I talk about what it could be as far as outside of the Senate, more than presiding over that. You still have a voice. We're in Virginia, we have 3 statewide elected officials. You look over at, let's say, a small state like Montana has 6. Georgia has something like 12. As one of 3, you have influence and you have a voice. And I think what I'm going to this role as is to be an advocate. The same way I was an advocate in the NAACP that didn't necessarily have the power to change anything, but using the influence you have to both talk to the governor, talk to your colleagues in the Senate, but talk to the public. Tell them about who enrichment is impeding progress. Because for the most part, while all of us on this line follow these things closely, most people are just trying to pay their bills and keep their head down. We need people who are speaking out and saying, this is the barrier to progress. This is how this can benefit you. This is why we're going out there talking about policy, while we're writing op-eds and we're doing all these things, because we want to influence the conversation in which direction this goes. When we look at legalization, when we look at ending the death penalty, it was folks like Mark Herring speaking up and Governor North, and it was those three saying that they were in favor of these things that really got us the momentum to make things move. Of course, we had advocates on the ground, but I think that the statewide elected officials have a role to play in, especially the lieutenant governor, in what is next for Virginia, what's the vision for where we're going. So that's kind of how I view the role, that you can be an advocate in that position.
To follow it up, you know, when you talk about advocacy, you know, we both have been NAACP presidents, so we know that, you know, you have to advocate from a position that, you know, this organization has reputation and whatnot. But so, you know, what do you foresee yourself actually doing in that role? Because again, I've seen it up close and personal, and it's really, you know, it's really strange how the state of Virginia sets it up. It's almost like it's, you know, it's an afterthought with the lieutenant governor. We just got to have somebody take over if the governor's not there. How do you physically see yourself doing? Do you see yourself traveling around the state? What do you see yourself doing in this role?
Yeah, you know, and I think there's opportunities here. In the pandemic, I would have loved it to see it. And, you know, again, you have to work with the governor, and it's up to what the governor says, gives you ability to do. But I think I would love to see it traveling around the state, being a better partner to localities. As I travel around now and I speak to localities, the one thing I hear is, you know, they have a lot of great ideas in Richmond. And then what ends up happening with those ideas is they have unfunded mandates where they basically send them to us and then tell us how to figure it out. And that goes from the Commonwealth attorneys, where they say every officer should have a body cam, but then who's going to watch that footage? They tell the schools, like, you need to put these things into place, but do it with the same amount of money you had last year. So I think the lieutenant governor can be a better partner and speak up for localities and be a better partner to those folks on the ground. But I also look at it as this should be a person who is not only a leader in the state, but a leader in their party. The party right now, Democrats have controlled the statewide government for going on 11 years now. We need to start talking about what are our values. Do we stand up for working class folks? Are we supporting primary challengers who are going against folks who have traditionally voted against Democrats when we needed them? These are all the conversations that we need to be having. And I think the lieutenant governor role is one where you can play in that space and do something more than just what the governor has told you to do. So I see it as being a leader in the party, helping people get elected, but also speaking out, writing op-eds, talking about those things, but then also being a partner to the localities and to the grassroots advocates on the ground, traveling the state and amplifying their voices and their issues.
If I could ask one more question, I just this deals with issues near and dear. You know, just this week, a couple of days ago, we saw what the Democratic Party in Virginia and a lot of their leaders think of African American leadership. We have 3 very competent African Americans running for the position of governor, and our governor decided that he wanted to pick the other white guy that was there before. And so this is not something that's an isolated incident within the Democratic Party in Virginia. The way they treat African American candidates, the way they treat African American people, the way they go about doing business. You know, I've personally called it a plantation. How do you see your role in changing the way, as a senior ranking, you'll be a senior ranking Democratic member of the Democratic Party in Virginia, changing how they think and how they treat us as African Americans in this?
You know, I think, Phil, you've hit on it. For me, and I think it's important to say this, we have to talk about the African American experience in this party specifically. A lot of times we talk about people of color, which is an inclusive term, and I appreciate it. But there is such a thing as anti-Black racism. And I've seen that too many times for candidates who are running, who, like you said, aren't given an opportunity, who are dismissed. They look for another person of color who may be more palatable to them, that sort of thing. I think the only way to do it is to have the honest conversations, and then also for me, if I become lieutenant governor, to reach back and be pulling people up and recruiting them, right? That's the only way that we're going to do it, because the party does not recruit people like me. Regardless of how people feel about my candidacy, they have to admit it's one of the more competitive lieutenant governor campaigns in this race. I was not recruited. I was not sought out and after, and I was doubted. And so I understand that, and I think we have to, as a party, we have to live out our values. The Black Lives Matter signs are cute, but what are you doing to get Black leadership? What are you doing to support people on the ground? We are the most impacted community on issue after issue, and sometimes people don't want to talk about that. So I think it's tackling those things honestly, and that's what I would plan to do, is talk about where are our Black candidates, what are we doing to get Black people running for office and supporting them.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Sean. Sean, what we're going to do is give you 2 minutes if you would like to use that time to just kind of do a closing argument. I said closing argument, closing statement, lawyer to lawyer. So if you would like to do that, you're welcome to have that time.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you all for having me and giving me time to speak. Apologies that I couldn't come with the other candidates and I got to speak a little separately, but this election is about more than 2021. I think Phil hit on it and others. This is about what we're doing in Virginia and in the party beyond this. What are we doing to raise up a next set of leadership? What are we saying are our values? Or are we really defining who we are as Democrats and what Virginia is about? And for me, I am leading on a campaign that is focused on equity and justice, whether that be racial, economic, or environmental justice. Too often, the people who are closest to the pain are not closest to the power. We need honest brokers there who are speaking on the behalf of the grassroots and amplifying and lifting up those voices. And that's what I'm hoping to do. Sean Perryman is perrymanforvirginia.com. And what you'll hear from other people is that they've been elected, they've introduced bills, they haven't gotten them done. I have a record of getting things done in one of the most important and largest counties in the Commonwealth. I have a record of standing up for people in rural Virginia, all throughout the Commonwealth, on their issues and standing alongside them. And I have a long history of working with policy. So I hope you will consider me as a candidate for Lieutenant Governor. We're going to be reaching out to you and visiting your part of the Commonwealth soon. But it's perrymanforvirginia.com. Thank you so much for having me.